Good afternoon. This is a video of how you fit this mud flap to this Scenic, thus making it look very good and preventing mud from flying all over the back of it and mud from flying all the way down the side of it. Now, why would I be making a video about this? Why wouldn't I just follow the instructions that came with the mud flaps? Well, here's the thing. So, these mud flaps are universal. They are universal Renault mud flaps. They come with these instructions, very, very detailed instructions, and they come with a whole list of cars that these mud flaps are for. Like almost every car in the Renault range, except the Renault Scenic 3. This is a Grand Scenic. There is no way of fitting those mud flaps to this car. So, how do we do it? Well, why is it a problem for a start? Well, I'll show you why it's a problem. If you look at the rear of the car, there's actually nothing to screw them to, nothing at all. Same in the front, there's just nothing to screw them to. The way they've designed it is just, no one thought in the design process of this car. You see there's quite a big lip underneath here. No one thought about how you might put a mud flap on this car. And of course, living here in the French countryside, where there is mud absolutely everywhere, mud flaps are critical. So how do we do this? Well, what I've done is I've come up with a system, and I'm going to show you my system. Now, in order to mount these mud flaps, we need to fabricate some tabs. And in order to do that, we need to pick a material. Now, I've picked this material. It is a plastic angle that I bought at a local hardware store. It's pretty strong, and I've roughed it on a couple of edges. Now, the great thing about this plastic is it's very light and cheap. The downside is it's very thin. So putting a screw through it, the screw doesn't have a whole lot to grip onto. But if you double it up, you can screw into it really well. The screw holds really nicely. So, and by the way, the reason I've roughed it is because the glue, the epoxy that I'm using has to have something to bond to. Otherwise, it just doesn't bond well. So that's how I'm going to mount these to the car. Now, I'm using epoxy. And the screws I'm using are these screws with a little, I don't know what you call these, they've got like a little built-in hat, and they work very nicely. Okay, I'm going to glue these on, and then you'll see how I've done it. Okay, so these are the fronts. Now I've glued them in position, roughly where I want them to be. And there's 4 of them, as you can see. It's nice to be able to glue into this lip on the fender. But as you can see, I've added the extra pieces to the front of the tabs to compensate for the gap created by the lip, and also to give the screws a little bit more meat to screw into. So that's the front. And then as we move to the rear, it looks about the same. You'll see with the rear, they can go completely flush to the edge of the bumper. And because of that, I've added the extra piece of plastic to the back of the tabs rather than the front. These ones tend to move around a little bit when the glue is just first applied, so you might need to find that you support them with a bit of duct tape or something like that. That's what I did, and I've taken off the duct tape now that they're in the process of drying, and it's looking good. So now that the glue is set and all our tabs are in the position we want them to be, we have to choose a pose for our mud flaps. Now, there are various schools of thought about this. You can go for the what I would call the sort of embarrassed factory pose, which is very shy, not really showing a whole lot, quite high, which looks good, but is, I would argue, a little ineffectual. So what I've chosen to do is to come down a little bit further and come out a little bit further for a pose like that. That's actually going to be much more effective at stopping the mud going down the car. Now, this is roughly about 6 centimeters hanging down at the bottom here and coming out roughly 3 centimeters here. So that is where I've ended up with that. And with the rear, it actually comes down lower. Now it looks right for it to come down lower. The rear comes down about 8 centimeters at the bottom and comes out roughly about the same as the front. So, I mean, I've done it by sight, but this is how it looks on this side. I mean, it just looks right. Honestly, it just looks right. The rear looks like that. The front looks like that. Now, the way that I've chosen to do this is to mark where the top should be on the fender. then put in the top screw just to position the thing. And then once you've got that in, you can walk away. You can have a look at the positioning and get it exactly the way you want it, get it positioned to just the right pose, and then come back out and put in one of the bottom screws. And once the bottom screw is in, it's fixed in place, and then you can figure out where all the rest of the screws go. We have 4 screws in place, and once you've done that, I suggest you take a step back and admire your work. Give it a little test, make sure that it feels secure. Now you'll see here that it's a little bit flappy. We need to put an extra screw in back here that will screw into the felt. Now you can screw into this felt. It will work. It's not ideal, but you can. And I'm going to put an extra screw in here simply because there'll be quite a lot of stress on the bottom of this with wind and rain and rocks and mud and stuff. So now while we're talking about it, I don't love these screws. They look a bit DIY. I wish they were black anodized, and in fact I did get some black anodized one with one of the sets, but I didn't get enough to do the whole thing. So I'm probably just going to go on eBay and look for some of these because it will look a lot better with these rather than these. These might also rust, I'm not sure. Another point is that you could, in theory, drill into the fender if you wanted to. The fender actually is plastic, I think. It feels like plastic. It sounds like plastic. So you could do that. But even if you were to do that, you'd still have to fix a piece in the bottom because there's no solution for that. And this just feels more sturdy to me. And it's reversible too. I can pull all this out and put it back to stock, and you know, it's not got holes drilled in it. So anyway, once you've done all of that, I highly recommend you have a cup of tea. Moving on to the rear. So in order to get access to put the screws in, you need to be able to remove the rear wheel. Now this is a task that Renault never intended the owner of a Scenic 3 to be able to do, since they never included a jack or a toolkit or a spare wheel or a wrench or anything that would facilitate the removal of a wheel. However, I've managed to use my initiative and figure out how to do it. And now we have access to fit the mudguard. Now, positioning, the top of it, I've positioned about 9 centimeters above this little gap here. So it's going to go in roughly like that. So just while this first screw is in place, a quick note about positioning. You'll note that as it stands, the mud flap is about as far down and about as far out as it could possibly be, because we're going to have to put a screw in this corner, and if it were any further down or any further out, we'd be screwing into thin air. So ultimately, on the spectrum of, you know, standing embarrassed or standing proud, this is standing about as proud as it could possibly be, which is excellent because that's what I was aiming for. And there we have it. The last mud flap is in place. The 2 extra bottom screws that I wanted to put in are in. And quite honestly, I think it looks great. I think it really suits the lines of the car very nicely. And really, I mean, I think the car would look wrong without them. They look very good. So I'm going to promise to report back on the efficacy of these, how well they do, how well they keep mud off the car. And I also promise to report back on the longevity of them. If they start coming off, I will let you know. I don't think they will, but I'm not sure yet quite how much to trust the Aerolite that I used, so we'll see. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope this has been helpful.